Maybe you remember reading Plato's Allegory of the Cave in an English literature class you took in junior high or high school, or maybe you had a humanities course that you took along the way. It's been taught for years and years. I don't know if it's still taught today, but it was kind of a cornerstone of Western literature when I took my educational process. Hello, my name is Edward Durante, and this is Life Perfect Square. Before we talk about the allegory itself, it might be helpful if we have a clear understanding of what the definition of the term allegory actually is. According to the dictionary, an allegory is a storytelling technique where you employ the characters, events, and setting to give some kind of lesson that is either moral, philosophical, or political in nature and has implications on your life and the lives of others. Of course, this meets the definition of Plato's Allegory of the Cave, which he wrote thousands of years ago in his book, The Republic. It appears in chapter 7 of The Republic if you're interested. So what is the allegory of the cave and why do we care about it today? Well, the allegory was kind of a simple representation, and here's how it goes. Picture a cave, and inside that cave there are a bunch of guys sitting on the ground and they're chained around their neck, and they're not looking at the entrance to the cave, but rather at the rear wall. And that rear wall is somewhat flat and reflective, kind of looks like a movie screen. The sunlight is filtering in through the opening behind them and casting shadows on the rear wall. They can only see the rear wall. Behind these people that are chained by their neck are some puppeteers. And these puppeteers are putting on a show. They're moving their hands and things are dancing around, creating shadows on the wall. And the men that are chained up are looking at the shadows of the wall. And all the time, all they're seeing are the shadows. Before long, they tend to believe that the shadows are reality, that this is their reality. It's all they see every day. Therefore, that's their reality. Kind of like listening to the same news channel or getting your media from one social media outlet. These are called silos. We have these silos of information, and when we go on a social media platform, the algorithms that are there, the AI, they see what we're interested in by what we select, and then they start to silo or give you only the information that corresponds to what you're interested in. So back to Plato's Allegory of the Cave. These men are sitting there chained up watching the shadows on the wall, their form of reality, and one day either one of them breaks free or is set free, and he turns around and goes out of the entrance of the cave, and he's out into the bright sunlight. Immediately he's blinded, puts his hands up to his eyes, starts rubbing them because he can't see anything. After a little while, his eyes start to adjust. He can see more and more of the light around him. And lo and behold, he looks around and there's a world that he never realized existed. This is the reality now. He understands that there were things going on that he had no understanding of until this time when he's standing out in the bright sunlight and he can see for the first time without the shadows of the cave. Isn't our life sometimes like this? Aren't we convinced that some of the things that we do every day, the information that we consume, the information that comes to us over our television stations, if we're watching a news outlet, and by the way, every news outlet is biased in one way or another, whether it's liberal, conservative, moderate, it doesn't matter. They all have an editorial point of view. If you only get your news from one particular source, You're only going to get the things that reinforce your ideas and your concepts. If you really want to get a balanced view, you should look at the things that are disparate from your point of view. If, for example, you're a conservative by nature and you listen to conservative news outlets, try listening to the liberal ones. If you're a liberal person and you're getting your news from a liberal outlet, try listening to the conservative ones. Try finding a moderate one. Try finding some foreign ones. Try mixing in your media so that you're getting information from different places. This may be difficult to do, and at first it's a little disconcerting because we tend to want to associate with the people, places, and things that we find familiar. Which brings me to a whole other idea. How did you formulate your ideas and your concepts and your beliefs to begin with? Were you born into a particular cultural or religious family? Were you fed religious ideas and tenets and concepts from the time you were young? Did those work for you as you were progressing through your years and growing up and getting your education? Does it work for you today? Have you questioned these ideas? I come from a liberal background, and it's not really important whether I'm liberal or conservative, but I'm trying to give you my point of view. I went to school and college and university and graduate school in a very tumultuous period in the United States in the late 60s, early 70s. We were protesting the Vietnam War. We were rebelling against authority. And we had a credo at that time, and that credo was question everything. I think that's pretty good. I think it's good today. Stands up today. I don't care what your political background is, what your view of the world is, what your culture has taught you, what your religious background is, what your educational formula is. You should still question it. You've given the ability to reason. As far as I'm concerned, here on this planet, maybe I shouldn't say that without questioning things, but as far as I know, we human beings are the only ones that have the ability to reason. Now, that could be wrong, and I may be found wrong in the future, and maybe we have people living among us that are from other planets, other solar systems, other periods of time. I'm going to get into that in future podcasts. But for today, let's confine ourselves to the human element, the one that we know the best, the one that we're a member of that group. Are we seeing reality the way it is? Or are we, like the movie The Matrix told us, are we in some computer simulation? Are we really seeing what's in front of us, what our five senses are telling us is reality, or have we just been conditioned that way? I used to think that was totally preposterous that, we could be living in a computer simulation. Even before there were computers, there was a concept that if you took someone's brain and you kept the brain in formaldehyde and somehow stimulated the brain with electronic impulses, that you could create pictures and the brain would actually respond as though it were still alive and still inside a living being. That was before we had computer simulations, where now today, if you put on some virtual reality goggles, you can be an NFL player, you can be a fireman, you can be driving a race car, you can be a ballerina, you can be in foreign lands, you can have a virtual reality. Are we living in a virtual reality, or are we living in actual reality? I'm not sure. And maybe you haven't thought about it, but I don't know how you can be sure either. Most of us are just busy every day. We're going about our lives. We have some jobs or professions, the way of earning a living so that we can pay our bills, keep a roof over our head, plan for the future, put some money away, put 529 college funds away for our children. Maybe we're planning a vacation. Maybe we're going to move to a larger home. Maybe we're saving for something else entirely. But we're generally consumed with our day-to-day activities, kind of like looking at the shadows on the wall in Plato's allegory of the cave. Are we really stepping outside into the sunlight and seeing reality for the first time? Well, we're in an age of awareness now. We're waking up. There are people walking around next to you. Maybe you see them in the coffee shop when you're getting your morning coffee. Maybe you're driving down the road and you pass them on the road. Maybe you're taking a walk after work to get some exercise and you pass them and they wave to you kindly on the street. But there are people around us that are waking up, that remember how powerful they are, that remember that they have divinity inside them. We all have this divinity. We're living on a planet that we've been told was just an accident, that somehow this was an accident of fate in the universe that created this environment. And then further, there was another accident that took place on the earth over thousands and thousands of years, and out of the primordial ooze rose up these proteins, and then there were single-celled organisms, and according to Darwin's theory of evolution, those single-celled organisms developed into multi-celled organisms, became plants and animals, and eventually it came to the simian life and our Neanderthal ancestors, and somehow we progressed to be the Homo sapiens that we are today. Not so sure that we can draw that linear distinction, and not so sure that this is a series of cosmic accidents that took place. If you believe in some religious text, perhaps that you believe in the Judeo-Christian theory of things, maybe there's creationism, perhaps there's an all-knowing, all-seeing, omniscient God that created the world in 7 days. You're familiar with this particular explanation of things, and created man and called him Adam, and from Adam he took a rib and created Eve, and Adam and Eve are the parents of all the humans that are on the earth today, with some kind of direct lineage. Not so sure that that story works for me, and probably doesn't work for a lot of other people too, although it probably contains some elements of truth, just like Darwin's theory of evolution contains some elements of truth. But there's always something missing there. This cosmological idea that the universe just, somehow accidentally created the earth. There's a theory called the Goldilocks theory. I don't know if you're familiar with the Goldilocks theory. It's not the one about Goldilocks and the Three Bears, although that's a wonderful childhood rhyme that we're all familiar with. This Goldilocks theory says that let's look at the individual things that would have to happen randomly that would create the earth the way it is so that it could sustain life. First of all, the planet would have to be in this Goldilocks zone. It would have to be a certain distance from a star, which is our sun, and that distance would have to be perfect in order to give us the type of gravity that's necessary, the type of oxygen, nitrogen, and hydrogen composition in air that we could breathe, that would create the environment for water, and water would exist in more than 2/3 of the planet. The mean temperature would have to be such that it's not too hot or not too cold. It's a mean average temperature on the earth year-round of 59 degrees Fahrenheit, 15 degrees centigrade. So you'd have to have all of those things. You'd also, in the star that we call the sun, Typically, in other solar systems, most stars have one that's orbiting with them. So there are usually two stars, not just one sun, but two suns. And if we had two suns here, it would make the gravity of the Earth very difficult for human beings to exist. So we'd have to be the right distance from a star, like the sun, and it would have to be just one sun, not two. We'd have to have the ability for water to exist. We'd have to have the air composition of nitrogen, hydrogen, and oxygen in the prescribed percentages that we have. You'd also have to have a fair number of rocks. So the planet would have to have rocks on it, not a gaseous mass like some of the other planets out there, because we couldn't exist in a gaseous atmosphere. We'd also have to have a molten core, which is what exists on the Earth, surrounded by a mantle or a crust that would protect it, that creates a magnetic field, because we have to have the magnetic field that will protect us from harmful rays that are coming from the sun. And the sun would have to be very stable. It'd have to be stable in a way, and aside from solar flares that we see once in a while, our sun is a pretty stable star. It doesn't fade in and out. We can predict how the distance that we have from the sun as we're orbiting around it. Everything is pretty stable. So if you look at this, I just gave you 7 Goldilocks terms. I didn't break them down 1 through 7, but if you think back on what I've described here about the distance from the star being the one and only, the magnetic field that's created, the ability to have water, the composition of the atmosphere, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, and trace elements, the magnetic field that's created by the molten core that's surrounded by the mantle and the crust. If you add them up, you'll see that there's about 7 Goldilocks events. The likelihood that all of those Goldilocks events happened randomly is something like 10 to the 43rd power. That's a ridiculous number. I mean, the odds of winning any lottery is so much greater than 10 to the 43 power that you could win lottery after lottery after lottery. It would be like buying a lottery ticket once a week and winning every time for years in a row in order for these Goldilocks events to have taken place randomly. Not sure that we're here randomly. As a matter of fact, I'm almost certain that we're not here randomly. I'm also certain that what you do in your life is not random. Some of us are, kind of searching around and roaming here and there. We go in and out of things and we're trying to find our way. We're trying to find the passion that we have, what we're supposed to do. It's like Nietzsche said, and I talked about Nietzsche in one of my previous podcasts, that he who has a why can withstand any how. So if you figure out why you're here, it doesn't matter how you accomplish it. It only matters that you pursue that why. And each of us has a purpose here. Each of us has the talents and abilities, everything that's necessary for us to complete that mission, to do it well, to do it in a joyful and passionate way that provides something to other people, that makes their lives better, gives them a better understanding, enjoyable, and gives them a future that is better than what they're experiencing now. You have that inside you. Every one of you who are listening to this podcast, doesn't matter if you're male or female, if you're tall or short, if you're young or old, if you're black or white or yellow or red or green for that matter. It only matters that you find what it is that you're passionate about, what you have the skills and abilities and innate talents to bring to the world. Talked about this before, that the world is like a giant stew. It's in a cauldron and it's bubbling around, and everyone contributes something to that stew. You can contribute something that's sweet and tasty or savory for someone else, or you can contribute something that's bitter and causes them to spit it out when they see it. What is it that you're contributing? Have you thought about it lately? Have you thought about how you got to where you are today? What paths have you taken? Have you gone down some dead ends, gone down some cul-de-sacs, some rabbit holes, and you had to come back out the other side? That's okay. It's okay. We all do that, because each time that you go down what could be termed a wrong turn, or you went down a rabbit hole, or you came to a dead end and you had to start over, you learned something. You either had success or you had a learning experience. You know, I had a feng shui master once who performed a little exercise with me. He made me stand at the opposite end of a room, and in the front of the room where he was, he put a chair down. And he said, "Okay, I want you to walk to this chair." And I pretty much walked in a straight line, and when I got to the chair, he said, "Yeah, that's very good. Now I want you to go back and I want you to walk to the chair, but don't walk in a straight line. Take a slightly different path." So I did, and he made me repeat this 7 or 8 times, each time taking a different path. And then finally he said to me, "Okay, now that you've done this 7 or 8 times, what did you learn?" And I had to think about that for a minute. And then I came up with the idea, well, it didn't matter which path that I took. Eventually, I wound up in the same place, at the chair. He said, "Yeah, that's exactly the point. That's how life is." So once you can see where your destination is and you formulate that in your mind, it doesn't matter which path you take. It doesn't matter how long it takes you to get there. It doesn't matter if you took a few wrong turns along the way, or you went to a dead end here or there, or you went down a rabbit hole, because you were learning, and it put you back on the path, and it eventually took you to your destination. And remember, you have that destination. Maybe it was back when you were young and you had all that fire and enthusiasm. I don't know, maybe you decided early on, I want to be an attorney, or I want to be a physician, or I want to be a policeman, or I want to be a fireman, or a carpenter, or a builder, or an architect, or a computer programmer, scientist. I don't know what it was, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what I think you should be, or what your family thinks you should be, or what your spouse thinks you should be, or your children, or anyone else. It only matters what you have passion for, because you're equipped to carry out that passion in a way that no one else can do it. And the problem with it is that you keep getting conditioned by the people around you, by your family, by your friends, by your peer group, by your educators, by the media that you consume each day. You keep getting conditioned in ways that are antithetical to what you're trying to accomplish. You need to shake that off. You need to get off by yourself. You need to have some quiet time. You need to go deep inside. The answers aren't out there. They're in here. They're inside. Heaven is within you. That's a fact for every one of us. It's literal. It's not some metaphor. It's literal. Heaven is within you. You have to find it. You have to figure it out. but it's in there. And all you have to do is turn your attention inside, not outside. It's growing on the inside that's important. Doesn't matter what's happening out there. Out there is not reality. Your senses are not giving you accurate information all the time. They're giving you information, it's true, but it can be misconstrued, it can be twisted, it can be 50% true, 60%, 90%. Internally, you have a GPS. That GPS, your heart, by the way, has its own brain, has its own neurological activity, and it has an output, an electrical output, that is many times greater than the electrical output of your brain. Did you know that? Did you know that your heart's electrical output is greater than the electrical output of your brain? Hard to believe. Did you know that each of your cells has an electrical output? It's calculated to be 0.07 volts. So you have 50 trillion cells in your body, and each of them has an electrical output of 0.07. So if you multiply 0.07 times 50 trillion, and you see how many volts of energy your body is capable of producing. I saw this example once, and I just read it again in a book by Greg Braden called Pure Human. If you haven't read it, it's a great book, published in 2025. I'm a big fan of Greg Braden. Anyway, in that book, he says that, the electrical output of your 50 trillion cells is described this way. You know what a 12-volt car battery looks like, what the size is, kind of hefty. If you've ever carried one around, they're a little bit heavy, maybe 25, 30 pounds. So if you can picture in your mind what a 12-volt auto battery looks like, imagine that you're stacking them up side by side. Take about 8,000 of those, according to Greg Braden, to fill a football field. And it would take 31,000 football fields filled with 12-volt batteries to equal the output of your electrical combination of cells, the 50 trillion cells that comprise your body every day. It's pretty amazing. Imagine what we could accomplish. Imagine what we could accomplish with that electrical output. So what I want you to think about is that you are a bundle of electricity, of energy that you've never even tapped. Never tapped. You're using, 5%, 10%, 15% of your brain? We talked about this before. Some people maybe are using at the lower end of that scale, somewhere around 5% of that brain. Doesn't mean that they cannot use more, just means that they are using less. And some people are using at the upper end, somewhere close to 15% of their brain. It doesn't mean that they're superior, it just means that they've paid attention to and unlocked some of that ability. We're going to find in the very near future, we're going to find people that are using 20, 25, 30, 35, 50, 70% of their brain's power, and they are going to be able to do amazing feats. And we're all capable of doing those amazing feats. I want to talk to you today about reminding you what a powerful person you are. Find that power inside you. Find the power, put it together with your joy and your passion and the things that you can do that only you can do, and bring that out into the world. I understand it's difficult. I understand you have commitments and responsibilities, as do we all. I understand that it's difficult to turn your back on those responsibilities and those commitments, and I'm not asking you to do that. I'm asking you, at the same time you're paying attention to those responsibilities and commitments, that you find the time to find again what your passion, what your joy is, what you truly want to do. If money was no object whatsoever, if you had no commitments and responsibilities, if you weren't compelled to get out of bed each day and go where it is that you go, to your office or to the factory or wherever it is that you go, to the courtroom or the operating room or to wherever, if you had no commitments like that, what would you be doing? That's what you need to focus on, because that's going to unlock the joy and passion in your life. And once you're doing what you're truly meant to do, where time stands still, where you feel like you're alive in every fiber of your body, and all 50 trillion of those cells are firing 0.07 volts of electricity at the same time, you are on fire. And nothing can stop you. And remember that each of us owes it to ourselves, and we owe it to the people around us, and we owe it to everyone else in the world, because we're all connected. We're all in this same life experience, and we're all floating around on this big blue marble out there in the universe at the same time. So find your passion, fire it up, put it to good use. This is Edward Durante, and this is Life Perfect Square. You can find my full-length podcasts on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.